So all the videos we made so far were about the short run. And in the short run, we were keeping one factor fixed. And namely, in our examples, we were keeping capital fixed. So now what we want to talk about cost in the long run. Okay, well, I can use LR because that's what I'm going to be using throughout the course. So in the long run, nothing is fixed. That's the definition of the long run, actually, is how long is the short run? Well, the short run is when something can't be changed, right? It's too short for something to be changed. And so long run is that everything can be changed. So we can change all the inputs, including K, physical capital, okay, including RK. So how long that short run part is, it depends on the industry. So for example, if you had a pretty simple business like a small cart that sells food, then you could probably get this up and running and make some changes and go through all the process to get licensed in several months. And then if it's a more complicated business like a large upscale sit-down restaurant, that would probably take you months and months, maybe even a year, to get the place rented and contracted and all the licenses and do the renovations and train the staff and everything else. Quite a long time. If you're thinking of something like a car factory, then it might take you 5 years to get it up and running, right? To get a automobile company up and running might take years and years and years and years, not just 1 year. So again, we can see there's these different short runs. So, but in the long run now, we're saying we can change everything. So what do I mean by everything? I'll say, well, you could make your factory bigger, right? You could expand your factory. You could add a second factory. You could make your restaurant bigger. Okay. You could expand the kitchen, right? So you're changing big things that you can't just change overnight, but in the long run, you can change them. So we can think of this. One way to define that idea is, well, you can change the scale of your production. So before, our scale of production was, we were choosing which quantity, but our overall scale, the size of our business, was fixed, right? So now we're allowing this to happen. We're allowing this to be changed. And so we're putting here, they're going to draw curve that's slightly different. You can think of this as maybe quantity per day, right? And then we're going to do an idea that's a little different than what we did before, okay? And so, or you can also just call this output. Output is, yeah, let's call it output. That's okay. So then here's our cost. So it looks kind of like what we did before, but it's a little different. Okay, so it's a little different. So we're going to draw some short run curves. So you can think of the average cost curve we drew before as a short run average cost curve. So let's suppose you do a tiny little firm. Okay, tiny. So you're like, this is tiny scale. Okay, so this one is tiny. So your restaurant, this is like, so it was just to keep the restaurant idea going because it's something we all kind of have some basic understanding of. This is the world's tiniest restaurant, right? So you have a little tiny oven, a small counter, a couple tables, and max is about 2 or 3 workers that could work there. So it's a super tiny restaurant, and so and the average cost looks like this. So yeah, you get up to your peak efficiency, and then as you try to keep going, your cost will increase quickly, and then pretty much it just becomes impossible to produce more because your place is too small. And then let's suppose we have another one that's more medium, okay, not so tiny. So this one's like medium. And this one, because it's a little bit larger, they can take advantage of economies of scale by dividing the work up more, doing more specialized. They can also buy a little bit more sophisticated equipment, which can produce things more efficiently. So they can lower their costs. And again, we're assuming the quality of what you're producing is the same at these different places. The actual product you're producing is the same. And maybe there's one that can be even bigger, like their kitchen is bigger, they have more equipment, everything else. And let's suppose their costs are basically the same as this medium one. They're large, and they're basically the same too, so they're also efficient. It's just they have more stuff, so they need to produce to get to their minimum of their average cost. They need to be producing more than the medium one because it's just a bigger restaurant. So their peak efficiency is going to happen at a higher quantity, but their average cost at that quantity is about the same. And then let's think of something humongous, giant. Okay, so like you make a restaurant that's as big as your average mall. Okay, the whole restaurant is that, just one restaurant is that big. So this one is giant. Okay, and so I've drawn them like this. So there's one that's tiny, and we're going to say it's too tiny in a second. And then there's this medium and this large one that are both pretty good. And then there's this giant one that's too giant. Okay, and so what we can do is we can kind of draw an outline. And you can imagine, it's called the envelope. You can imagine if there was, we also drew hundreds of other ones on here. So we can draw an outline of their curves, and we end up looking like this. And this is called the long run average cost curve. So the long run average cost curve is considering all the possible different scales of business you could do. So very little capital to humongous, right? And looking at the efficiency of those different ones. Now, you can think of there's actually all the scales in between. We're not going to draw them all, but they all could be there. Okay, for simplicity, we just kind of divide it into 4 areas. And so we can then label these areas. Okay, so the first area here, this one is called this area here. We can say, let me make this a little thicker. We can say that we have economies of scale. What that means is economies of scale means if we make it bigger, we will have a lower average cost. Okay, so that scale is just a little bit too small. So you're trying to compete with bigger companies, but they have much lower costs because their scale is more efficient. Okay, so you're trying to compete with the other people, but you're just too small, and so you're not going to be able to produce enough out of there to cover these high average costs. Then we get to some point where we reach this. This is called the minimum efficient scale. So this efficiency here means lowest cost possible, or at least lowest average cost possible. And so we get, this one is big enough. Now it's as good as we can do in terms of efficient cost structure. And everywhere in between here and here is called constant returns to scale. So here, constant returns to scale. So in this section, as you change your scale, the minimum average cost doesn't change, right? So you're not getting a cost advantage by changing your scale. There's still a reason one might be smaller and one might be bigger, but you're not getting a major cost advantage. So you don't have a big advantage in terms of cost in this business by being bigger or smaller. I mean, by being in this range, right? They're all competing equally. And then these ones we can say, start to get to be too big. So you can think of the first one is too small, and this one starts to be too big. And when they're getting too big, they're getting diseconomies. So they are becoming too large, and it's starting to get unwieldy to manage these businesses. Usually, this might happen when the thing gets too difficult to manage. Okay, so just to keep a restaurant example going, your restaurant gets so big that the distance from the kitchen to the dining area is so large that the transportation of the goods, of the meals from the back to the front, takes too long, and by the time it reaches the table, the food is cold, right? Or your kitchen has too many people working in it to where that the degree to manage all those people becomes really, really hectic and starts to be inefficient, because you start to even have maybe people that are shirking and not doing very much work, and the manager is too stretched, they don't even know what's going on, right? So there might be some scale which gets too big, and our managerial ability becomes limited, right? We're not good enough at managing it, at least currently, to do this. Now, where exactly these lie depends, and how big these different areas are depends. So there might be some businesses where really, really large scale is going to give you the best, and those businesses will often see very concentrated. So for example, the auto industry, autos pretty much need to be produced on a fairly large scale, quite large scale. It's pretty difficult to produce cars on a relatively small scale and be competitive in terms of cost. If you try to produce like 20 cars a year and you're doing all the stuff yourself or mostly yourself, you can imagine there's so many fixed costs involved. So like design and sort of buying the sophisticated equipment, etc. If you're spreading them over too few of cars, then your average cost could be really, really high, and you just have a hard time competing. So you're over there on this left-hand side. So in that industry, it might be the efficient scale is pretty large, quite large, but it's still possibly to be too big. If the firm becomes so big that they can no longer manage their quality or their supply chains effectively, that could be a problem. Then there's also possible that in another industry, the effective scale is quite small. And these kind of businesses, you'll see lots of them, and they'll be mostly relatively small and competing with each other. An example of that might be like a hair salon, where most of the hair salons are not very big, and it's fairly easy to start. And being a little bit bigger doesn't give you necessarily a big advantage in this industry. So those would be an example where the minimum efficient scale is probably quite a bit smaller, right? So this will vary from industry to industry, and you'll see this gives a different structure to the industry. We'll come back to this when we talk about some industries and why they might have just very few firms in them.